hello friends, and welcome back to Little Village Homestead. And Miss Mo is here.
Hello everybody.
We decided to do this outside because it's absolutely gorgeous out here.
Yeah, it's
And
beautiful.
we should have had our chairs turned that way. They could have seen in the background.
Yeah, well you can walk over that way.
Oh, they'll
I
see,
guess.
because I'm going to do a full homestead tour.
Yeah, I saw one you had on there not
Yeah.
too long ago. Chickens were small, and then you had one the first time maybe, and then they were a little bit bigger. Not like they are now, I don't
Yeah,
think.
oh gosh, they're getting big. And the roosters, those will be going to my son.
Yeah.
I've got 2 roosters in there. 3 roosters, but I'm keeping the one, Rocky. He's staying.
Yeah.
Anyway, today, and how do you like this, friends? My husband redid my chairs and my table for me, all with cedar wood. And yes, it's not sealed, it's not painted over because I want it to turn that beautiful
Silvery gray.
Yeah,
it's
silvery gray
beautiful.
that it turns.
They're comfortable.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
they sit with your back just perfect.
Mm-hmm. I love
Some of
them.
the chairs are, you lean way back.
These
Yeah.
basically are like repurposed, but I got this set at an estate sale when I had my resale shop.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yep. So
Just beautiful.
I'm
Your
loving
husband,
it. We
your
repainted
husband
them.
is handy.
Oh yeah,
really.
he is. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Anyway, friends, we're just yakking. We're bound to go off on a tangent, and that's all right.
We just took a little turn around the garden. Everything is just so beautiful. We've
Oh,
had a
yeah.
lot of rain, and now it is getting hot.
I'll tell you, a lot of people have been saying that their peppers and stuff is struggling because of all the rain we've had.
Yes.
But I really think mine are doing good, with the exception of those 2 tomato plants.
Those might be potato leaf tomato plants, which are heirloom. One is a Russian type, and there's a couple more that have like a potato leaf on them.
Yeah.
So they may be fine. I don't see that they're...
Oh, she got a big... You're okay. It's just a little beetle.
No, that's fine. I'm a gardener, avid, through and through, but I hate snakes, spiders,
Oh.
slugs, anything that, you know, is like gross factor.
Yeah, somebody asked me how to get slugs out of your garden. I said, coffee grounds.
That,
They hate them, and salt.
Diamitation earth,
Earth,
sprinkled around will
That's
do
good
it.
for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I put that in the chicken.
Some people use a lid full of beer. They go in and drown. You got to change it every other day, I guess. So,
So
yeah,
I was-
slugs are awful.
Yep, I answered that comment. But if you're watching, coffee grounds sprinkled around, and salt around the borders, and beer, a little thing of beer like you said, that will all get rid of slugs.
Yeah.
Keep them at bay.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we get, I got like the report here, you know.
Oh, good.
Because I'm so forgetful, and then we get off to talking about something else, and that's just how us women are, aren't we?
Yeah. Well,
We get to the point eventually.
You know, I make notes and I make lists all the time, but my philosophy is, if you don't get that list done, like in the first year, throw it away, make it another one. Yeah, so it wasn't important if you don't get it done the first year.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
don't sweat over these lists. I mean, I used to, and I mark them all off. I've got one going now that I'm working pretty good at,
Oh, yeah.
actually. Now I'm starting into the canning, and it's...
Heaven's sakes.
So...
Look at him fly.
Oh no! Oh. Oh no! You want help, Renee?
Oh, I got it.
Okay. So once canning season starts, you know, we're just daily canning something.
That's the fun of doing this outside.
Right. Yeah.
Let me put it back in order.
Yeah.
So I guess today is what we're going to do for you. And most of you have asked me about canning and are excited for canning videos. But I thought it would be wise to give them an introduction to canning. You know, the hows, the whys, the whens, and all that. And before I just throw a recipe down their throat.
Yep.
You know. So
Yeah.
let's see.
I have always wanted any young person, boy, man, woman, girl, if I know that they're interested in canning, I would help them no matter what. Give them jars, show them how to do like a simple jam. That's the best to start. Green beans or tomatoes. You know, green beans are a good introduction to a pressure cooker.
Yep.
Tomatoes, water bath, or you can pressure cook them less time, but usually I think I water bath them.
Yep. And
40.
salsa is easy to do for
Salsa,
water
people
bath.
love salsa, and spaghetti sauce, tomato sauce. One of the things I do, which I just love with the apple butter, when I make applesauce, I cook the big kettle full, and then I save out enough to put into my, it's not the slow cooker, but it's like a roaster, electric.
Yep.
I put that all in there, and then I cook it. It will never burn because it heats on the sides, not the bottom. And I leave it for hours, just slowly cooking, and then I add a little brown sugar or spice, whatever you want. And then it'll, when it's turned into apple butter, you just can it, put it in the jars, and then water bath it. But that little cooker, I usually get 12-ounce jars of apple butter if I have a full, you know, a full cooker full. It's not a huge, it's called a Nesco or something like that.
Oh, I know, yeah.
It's not the big one like the turkey one, but it's a small one. Yard sale find a few years ago, never been used. It was a wedding gift, never been used. So man, I have used that thing
Forever.
It's just beautiful. So you know, there's little tricks. Some people bake the applesauce, and you don't have to watch it so it doesn't burn. You know, you bake it in a big roasting pan.
Yeah.
Like you could tomato sauce or tomato paste.
Exactly. And on another note with that, you can get probably everything you need to can used.
Oh, yes.
Except your lids. Even the rings you could get used as long as they're in decent shape.
Yeah.
You know, but lids you can't reuse lids.
No, there are some called Tatler, I believe, that's a thick plastic that some people are trying to go to them so they can reuse them.
Have you ever used them?
I think one time.
See, I've never used them.
I think one time I did, and I just preferred the regular ball lids, but the newer ones I'm not real fond of. The old ones you used to kind of put them in a little boiling water. The old, and the rubber was thick. These new ones you don't. You can pour hot water on them and let them sit in hot water, but you're not supposed to boil them because of that. Whatever's under there now, I've had a few not seal like I like.
Right. I know exactly what you're saying, but is it because they're no longer, or not no longer, they are BPA free now?
It's possible. I'm not sure why they changed that, but I'm not real fond of that because I hardly ever had jars that didn't seal, but every now and then.
Every now and then I get more so often now than...
yes, more often now than ever before after 54 years of canning.
And you can't put them in boiling water because you will destroy that seal.
Exactly. They could be in some hot water just to kind of soften that a little bit, but yeah, I mean...
You used to have to boil the devil out of everything before you can.
I was going to call the company and complain, but I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't. I'll be extra more careful to see what maybe is going on. I might have had a little nick or something that I didn't see in the jar.
Perfect. That's...
I'll tell you, I have yard sales. People they'll say, you want jars? I'm cleaning my basement. We go anywhere to get jars. I probably have over 1,000 or more jars in my jar shed. And so anywhere I can get jars, I have gotten them, of course, 50 years. And I still use some of the first jars that my husband and I got. 1967, we moved from Frankfort, Michigan, down to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I wanted to can. We had one child. We didn't have any place for a garden, just a tiny house, but you know, you could buy stuff at the farmer's market or whatever.
Still to this day.
So we went to Salvation Army store and wash tubs full of these big, huge, thick, strong-shouldered mason jars, 50 cents a tub. Now that's not going to happen again, but I still have a lot of those, and I never forget that first haul we made, I guess. It was 2 or 3 big wash tubs full of jars.
You've had some given to you throughout the years too.
Oh, my neighbor called up last year and said one of the little houses where the mother had passed away was full of jars. But he hauled them all out for me, and my husband and I went and brought them home. We had like, I want to say 8 dozen or so out of that. A lot of pints, you know, but I still can in quarts a lot because my sister came to live with us last year. So we can eat a quart of green beans, or you want a quart of tomatoes for chili or vegetable soup, you know.
You feed a lot more than just the 3 of you.
Oh, I'm feeding my brother every day for lunch usually. His wife passed away, so he kind of adopted us, and he comes every day for lunch.
Yeah, that's sweet. That's
yeah. Sweet. Canning to me, I swear, that first year, I'd go in the basement and I'd look at them all and I'd pick them up and look at them. I was so proud, I guess, of what I had done, even though I helped some at home. We didn't can like I see some of the folks on the homesteading blogs do, because I've never, until Renee had me come over, I've never seen the blog, or I don't have a computer. Didn't even know what that was, actually. Right. It is so fascinating. I can't bring myself not to watch every evening when I sit down after supper. I just love it. And, you know.
Some of them ladies and some of the people that, you know, are on my channel would give their eye tooth to be able to sit right here next to you and talk about canning and all the homesteading stuff, because it's just amazing.
I know.
You're a wealth of information.
Well, there were 9 children, and I know we canned a lot of cherries and green beans. I'm not sure so much tomatoes, because frankly we were very poor and they didn't have money to buy things. Like, I would ask my sister now, she's 83, I said, why couldn't we eat rice? How come they didn't make biscuits? I don't think they could afford to buy rice or flour sometimes at all. She remembers having a sandwich with lard on it to take to before school.
My grandpa did.
They had no food.
Right.
And so my father, I was raised on venison, wild birds, rabbits, squirrels, and fish. And then we had cabbage and whatever he could buy on any given day, but mostly we'd have potatoes. He got potatoes. Then later on, when he finally was able to work well after the 30s, there were no jobs after the Depression, but they talked a lot about it, how there was nothing to eat. And I mean, if they had maybe a squirrel that he could have shot on home, you know, and they'd have gravy.
It was a rough time.
It was for my parents, and you know,
I don't think it was an easy time for anybody, really.
No, it was not. They know what it meant to be, well, you know, very frugal. So I love the challenge of being able to, somebody says, would you like this? Or if Renee says, would you like this? Oh yeah, I never turn anything down. It's either canned, dried, frozen. I'm getting into drying a little bit more because of Renee showing me, you know, and I did buy my beautiful food dryer at a yard sale.
Yeah.
I mean, it was brand new, not out of the box.
My dehydrator, I won't part with it. It's old. I think it's out of the 80s, to be honest with you, because John's mom had it. She got it brand new, never used it, stuck it up in her rafters in her house, and about 12 years ago she gave it to me. And she's since then passed away, but you know what? It seems like with that old dehydrator I use, I can dry beans without blanching them. I don't blanch a lot of stuff. I don't blanch, but it'll keep its color. Where the new one I have, if I don't blanch anything, it just turns black.
I know what you gave me with the kale, onions, different stuff that you had made, like a soup kind of mix. That's green still, the kale. It's
Yeah,
good. I throw it in soup.
It's amazing.
Potato soup. Oh.
So I won't part with that.
Yeah, that mixture is really good.
Boy, the day that quits on me is the day I'll just cry.
I was such a reader all my life, you know. We didn't have books at home much, but at school I read the encyclopedias, National Geographics. I read them from cover to cover. Anything I wanted to know, I read about. When my children were growing up, they want to know a word. I said, okay, we'll go to the dictionary, we'll find your word. You will never forget how to spell it. Now you can do it. It's just at a click of a button. It's just marvelous.
Google.
You Google
everything.
Yeah. And it's like, woohoo! But I read everything there was to know about canning and preserving and the old ways, like in France, how they did stuff. It's just unreal how some of that stuff was done.
Yeah.
I'm sure people could do that today.
Oh yeah, and I'm also going to put links to the USDA website, because we will get into this. We're just yakking and having fun, but we will get into the fundamentals of canning. But I also will put the website, the USDA website, in the link, or a link to it in the description box, along with Maureen's favorite book,
which is the Ball Blue Book. Everybody needs a Ball Blue Book. The latest one, if you can afford it. If not, sometimes Goodwill, Salvation Army has them.
You can always go to a local library.
Yes.
And
get
they have
copies or download some of your stuff, especially if your family, say, loves strawberry jam or anything. You know, you need to follow the rules. I always have been meticulous.
You have to.
54 years, like I said, I've been canning, and at home, some I help, but you cannot be careful enough.
Right.
No shortcuts.
And exactly, because the process of preserving food with the two methods, water bath and pressure canning, they both remove oxygen. They destroy enzymes, microorganisms. They prevent the growth of mold and yeast.
Bacteria.
And they also create a vacuum so that the liquid stays in and the oxygen and the microorganisms stay out of your jar.
Yep.
That's why it is so imperative to follow that recipe to the T. And I'm not talking just any recipe, because there's hundreds of them online.
Yeah, there
and
is.
A lot of, I'm not bashing anybody.
No.
A lot of canners who've been canning for a long time say, well, I can use this shortcut, I can use that shortcut. I can't stress to you enough, if you are new to canning, don't use a shortcut.
No.
Never. Never, because it brings us to another subject. Botulism.
Botulism, it's from things that are grown in the soil, you know, animal waste, different things, how it gets into the food.
Spores.
Yeah, and you don't want to, I had food poisoning.
It's a bacteria, yeah.
Twice, not probably botulism, but you just want to die.
Oh, botulism is the deadliest food poison.
It's a toxin.
It's a neurotoxin.
Neurotoxin that is deadly.
Yep.
Don't be afraid, as long as you're following the
guidelines,
the USDA guidelines, and you know, even with jams. In the beginning, I used to put wax because there's so much sugar. And I would put wax on the top of the jam, and they were stored in cool places, and every once in a while there'd be a little mold if the liquid might have seeped up, if I didn't have the wax sealed really well. And I'd scrape the mold off, and that was a different type of mold, you know. But I quit doing that after the first couple years.
Because your chances of getting botulism in a high acid food is almost null.
Right, it's the very low acid.
It's the sugar and the acid that doesn't even allow it to grow.
Correct.
In there. So that's why a lot of your high acid foods, and I'll give you a list of those, that they can safely be canned in a boiling water at 212 degrees.
Yeah, women And man, my husband canned quite a bit. He helped me a lot, as we had huge gardens. He helped a lot, and he learned the proper method, how to do things. And I was frankly afraid of a pressure cooker in the beginning, so I would water bath through the night, 3 hours at a time. If you're going to do green beans or potatoes or something, you've got to do it. If you did it in a water bath, it was 3 hours. So pressure cooker is so much better.
They don't even recommend. They don't recommend water bathing for 3 hours anymore.
No, not at all, because it can't get hot enough to kill the bacteria that's in the food.
Yeah, and water bathing it's just a big canner that's got a removable rack in it, and when you water bath, say a jar of you know, peach jam or whatever, or jar jam, some people don't water bath jam. Maybe that was a bad example, but jar of fruits.
I always do. I do. At first, like I said, I used the wax, like everybody did in the 60s. Then I quit that right away. So
right, but if you've got a canner full to water bath, you need to make sure that that water is at least an inch over that jar.
Yep.
And it boils, and you don't start your processing time until it boils.
You bring it
to a boil.
After the jars are in, you bring it back to the boil.
Yep. And then you continue.
Start your processing time at a good clip of a boil. You know, it should be a pretty good clip. I mean, not so it boils over, but I usually use like a medium high after I start the boil with the water bath. And
they say to leave it boil like that because it's not the jar that has to reach 212 degrees. It's the food inside the jar.
Yeah.
That has the internal part of the food. That inside of that peach has to reach 212 degrees.
Yeah.
That's why they have various times. Canning. Yeah.
One thing I learned too, I have to admit, I confess, this is something a few years ago I learned. I would always, when it was done, I shut the heat off, move the canner to the counter, and then take the jars out. Well, you know, they're boiling at a pretty good clip inside that jar. Usually the food is. So sometimes it would kind of come up out, boil out as it hit the cooler end.
It's called siphoning.
Yes.
Do you know what causes that?
Well,
the atmospheric pressure is different because of the temperature inside the canner, even though it's a water bath canner.
Correct. Yeah.
And the atmospheric pressure outside. So when it's going from that boiling hot water to the cool, it's going to siphon all your liquid out.
Isn't that something? So I learned, probably in the newer canning book, let the canner sit 5 minutes.
Down.
I put the timer on. After it's done, I turn the heat off. I remove it because I don't have gas. I have electric. Let it sit for 5 minutes, and then I carefully lift the jars.
Yep.
And of course, my husband, they're full of water on the lid.
Oh yeah.
He wants to tip them, and I tell him, don't tip them
no,
because you might bring liquid out. And I said they'll completely dry off in seconds.
Yeah.
And that helps them, I believe, kind of seal a little bit faster.
And if you're not sure about it, when you start lifting that jar out, if you hear it or all the bubbles start coming up, put it back in that water.
Yeah.
Just set it right back in and just leave it.
The 5 minutes after, usually, that it's done on the stove, that pretty well does it, but some of the stuff can still boil out.
Yeah, and when it does, when it creates that siphoning, you can't just assume it's going to seal because there could be food debris under that lid, between the lid and the ring.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times, I think that's with pressure canning though, a lot of times people will say, when they pack their hot food into their hot jars to get it ready for their hot canner, they'll be getting everything ready and they'll start hearing it ping.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Does not mean it's sealed.
No, no. It'll go into the canner or the pressure cooker, and it will, when you bring it back out after the time it's cooked, it'll seal.
Yeah, it still needs to be processed because you don't can simply to seal the jar. You have to can it to kill a bacteria. Yep.
Yeah. There's a lot to it when you're thinking about it newly, but you know, as you do a few times, you gain a little bit of.
Oh yeah, it can be intimidating, but don't let it intimidate you, because it is a skill that will benefit your life immensely.
Your family, even if there's yourself, some people can in half pints and pint jars, just for the sake of knowing, look, I did this. I can put this on my shelf, and I have something maybe to fall back on through hard times. We tell with our children, if it weren't for me canning, freezing, storing, we ate out of that. It took me a while to learn how to eat from the pantry instead of running to the store. But once you learn how to prepare your meals, it's amazing.
It's a homesteader's convenience.
Yeah, it's just, you know.
I call it my pantry the homestead drive-through, because you can just take it out and eat it up.
Yeah,
that's convenience food.
There was a lady I was watching on there the other day, and she kind of did that. She wanted to make a whole meal. And she went in and grabbed this, that, and she was making dessert. She made a dump cake. I don't know what all. It was
amazing what you can do with your pantry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of, you know, using it to fall on hard times, when my kids were young, I had a hard enough time doing Christmas for them.
I remember. I met you during
a
few of
that was times. Rough. So, like, for the adults in my family, I would make. That's what my homemade jams and my homemade apple butter. And then I would make homemade breads and biscuits and put it all in a pretty little basket, and that was my gift.
Yeah, one year my neighbor cut out little cutting boards for me out of some beautiful pine boards, brand new, little pigs, about this big, and I made bread and a strawberry butter or a jar of jam, and those, people love those kind of gifts.
Oh, I know.
Because it's how you show love. I do toward people. It's what I do from my heart. That's the love I can show through cooking, baking, canning, you know.
Exactly.
It's just amazing how this whole process works.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of time, how people have put their food by. And we're still working at that, even in this day and age, because, you know, many people have a hard time.
Oh,
families have hard times.
I don't care who you are, you know. I live paycheck to paycheck right now.
We do still.
I have not went grocery shopping, because all that you see in my yard, the chicken coop, the greenhouse, all the vegetables, my raised beds, that took my entire budget from April and May and June.
Well,
so May was the first time I went grocery shopping. Otherwise, we have lived out of the freezer and the pantry, and we have lived very comfortably out of the freezer and the pantry.
That garden, what I saw this morning when I first came to Renea's, within the month, she's going to have more than plenty to can, dry, freeze. It, you know, we lose power in the little village I live in sometimes through the winter. It doesn't even have to be winter. If a transformer burns out, we don't have power. So, you know, to have stuff on your shelf that you could make a meal from without, you could use a grill outside, not inside, but outside.
I have
to cook something for yourself.
Yeah. Those of my friends watching, how do you say this? When you lose your power, and you know, even if you're a canner, what's good for me is I can can. I've got my pressure canner. I've got my fire pit. I've got my barbecue. I can pull my stuff out of my freezer and I can freeze it over or can it over open flame.
Yes.
You know, I wouldn't advise that to somebody brand new to canning, but you know what? In a pinch, I won't lose that $500 worth of meat in my freezer, because I'll can every bit of it up.
No, I have an antique 2-burner propane gas stove that stands about this high and about that big. And that is a perfect thing. I think I canned on it one time just to try it, because it's propane gas. And it's amazing. I mean, you could, because pressure cooking, sometimes it's hard to get it to that sweet spot.
It is over fire, but you can do it.
Well,
where there's a will, there's a way.
I cooked on the wood cook stove for quite a few years, and believe me, you can rotate. I mean, the hottest part is getting stuff going really fast, Then you move it over to
Yep.
the slower heat.
Exactly.
It's if you're seeing an old recipe that says slow oven, or a medium oven, or a hot oven, you know that slow oven's like 250. The hot's up to 375, 400.
Yep.
And I never could get that oven to bake a loaf of bread to save my soul. I didn't know how to do the damper. I mean, I fed that stove it was almost, the chimney was almost on fire. It was so hot. And still couldn't get the bread to bake. It's like, all I can remember is my aunt telling me when they lived out in Oklahoma and Iowa, she'd go, now Mama, her mother, they picked up chips. And I go, chips? Oh yeah, buffalo chips, you know, buffalo manure. But she goes, Mama wouldn't use buffalo chips on baking day because it might have gave the bread and the pies a little bit more smell than they wanted. Well, they burned buffalo chips because near the prairie there was no wood.
Right.
So they burned cow chips, buffalo chips. Because my grandfather traded in the Indian Nation in Oklahoma. He traded meat for corn because the Native Americans there along the Current River, I believe he said, that's where they lived in Missouri. They would trade different things to the Native Americans, and yeah, they didn't have a lot of wood where they were at, I guess. And there's so many stories my aunt told me, because my dad's sisters lived till they were 102 and 3.
Oh my God, that's so interesting.
Oh, the stories.
You can just sit and listen to that all day.
My grandmother, when they put food up, I mean, there was sausage or pork chops put in lard by layers in the crocks. Fish was done in salt in crocks and put into the basement. Yeah, it's just amazing what women and men, my dad helped, he watched his mother can, and it's so fascinating to me what my aunt would tell me about how, and my dad too, with no refrigeration, how they stored food.
It's amazing.
Root cellars. Some people still do the root cellars.
Oh yeah,
so.
they're a big thing now.
Yeah, they are. I would love to have a root cellar. I mean, we have a Michigan cellar, which is just a
little room.
It's a room underneath, like our bathroom. Used to be the kitchen, but the stairs are steep. I wouldn't trust myself going down, but it stays a constant 40 degrees or less in there.
Yeah,
all
I've got
winter,
that
all summer.
In the corner of my basement, I have a room like that.
Yeah.
Although I don't use it for I won't use it for a root cellar, because there was a big, huge tarantula down there one morning, and it come running. I was sweeping the cobwebs out of there, because I was going to store my stuff in the basement, you know, in the root cellar. I was going to utilize that root cellar. Well, that little sucker come running right across the floor, jumped up on my foot and bit me, and it swelled up twice the size. And I threw the broom. I'm not scared of spiders, but I threw the broom, and I just broke out in a sweat, and I thought, you know what, never. I'm not going in. I haven't been in that room in years.
I know.
I won't go in there. There's a tarantula in it.
Well, yeah, I don't like spiders or snakes.
No.
I know they're good for something. God created them all for a purpose, but I haven't figured those out yet. Anyway, back to your basics of
let's see,
the vacuum. That
we pretty much covered water bath canning, because that's easy for them to do. And let me tell you, that's for all high acid foods.
Yes.
Which would include, I can find my list here because you've seen it, it got all tore up. We know it off the top of our head, but I want to make sure I don't miss any for them. Your high acid foods includes fruits, fruit juices, jams, jellies, fruit spreads, salsas, most tomatoes, pickles, relishes, chutneys, sauces, vinegars, and condiments. Anything else?
One thing I do just want to comment on, since the newer types of tomatoes, now you're growing heirlooms, they'll still have their acid like they should, but some of the newer bred tomatoes don't have the acid in them that they used to have. So if you do water bath them, I recommend that it's for that 45 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever a quart takes, and not off the top of my head.
Right, and you can also add, like, what is it, a teaspoon per quart of lemon juice?
You could.
Or vinegar to add the acid back into it?
You could, yeah. But since Renee grows heirloom tomatoes, a lot of hers, they have that acid like we used to love that tomato taste.
Yes, punch.
Yeah, people just don't care for that type of stuff, but gosh, I remember all of that type of stuff.
And if you're not sure about the tomatoes, just pressure can them.
Yes, you can do that, and it won't take as long. And
yeah, because when I do stewed tomatoes, they require pressure canning because of the onions and the celery.
Yes, the longest for stewed tomatoes, you have to do it for the lowest acid food, which might be celery, tomatoes, and peppers, or onions and peppers.
Yep.
Yeah. So you have to make sure that you pressure cook those, or
for whatever ingredient is in there that takes the longest processing time.
Yeah.
So if everything else in there takes 25 minutes to pressure can, but the celery takes 75, you need to do that whole batch for 75 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a little note in that too in here for, but that is also on the website too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good tip. That's a good tip because people don't know. They would, because they're doing tomatoes, they would think, oh, it's just for tomatoes.
Now, years ago, people used to do what they call open kettle. But here again, we're talking about the acid in the tomatoes, that was, I guess, relatively safe, they thought. I never heard of anybody.
There's a lot more bacteria out now than there was 50 years ago.
There is, and they open kettled it, put it in the jars, and sealed them. They had hot jars. They didn't water bath them.
Nope, they would just seal because of the heat.
Yeah, well, when I hear that, I kind of just raise my eyebrows. You cringe a little and you say, well, you know, that ball blue book.
You want to just grab them by the shoulders and say, what are you doing? But you can't.
Yeah.
But we can tell you, don't do that.
It's better to look it up if you don't understand something, or, you know, call Renee up, you know, if you're in the same time zone.
Yep.
Ask her a question.
Anytime.
Yeah.
I am going to, though, I am going to put a link, and I did tell them, to the USDA website.
Yeah.
They've got a beautiful, like, 126-page guide to home canning and preserving. And it takes you through dehydrating and freezing, not just canning, but it takes you through the whole process and explains everything to you. That book is the Canning Bible. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I try to buy a new ball book about every couple years because they may have a few different recipes, but I have some from my grandmother from 1927, and basically the recipes are the same. The methods are they're different, quite different from when my grandmother canned.
You know, somebody asked me one day, how come they could do it back 60 years ago or in the 1800s do it like that and never die from botulism? Well, because years ago, and I may be wrong, but years ago, when they would pull a jar off that shelf, pardon the pun, they'd boil the hell out of it.
Well, and today, the recommendation is when you take a vegetable, a soup, or anything from your shelf, you need to boil that 10 minutes on top of the stove if it's soup, which I do.
Yep.
Or if you're going to be using something in a casserole, then that will bake that at a 350, 375 at a high enough temperature for usually 40, 45 minutes. That
will kill the neurotoxin botulism.
Yeah, but you're supposed to boil.
It will not kill the spores, but the spores don't kill you. You know, you got to study on that too. The spores don't kill you. It's the toxin that kills you. And boiling for 10 minutes will kill that toxin.
Yes.
And that's why people were able to do a lot of the canning the way they did years and years and years ago and not die from botulism.
Yeah, and they didn't just go to the store. I mean, everything came out of that root cellar. Now, my aunt one time, I was canning deer carrots, okay? Because you can get a 50-pound bag of deer carrots that are so perfect for a couple bucks, okay? And I was canning carrots, and she goes, what are you canning carrots for? I said, well, to store them. She goes, well, don't you have a cellar? I mean, they were so used to putting all that in their root cellars,
yep.
and they stayed till spring.
Yeah.
But I like to have the carrots on the shelf in a can or jar. I mean,
Yeah, I do too.
I don't have a root cellar, and like I said, our basement would be ideal, but now that we're elderly, I don't look it, but
No.
I would have a hard time even getting down those steps, so.
Which brings me to another reason why it's good to home can. You can take that bag of carrots, put it in your root cellar, but it's only going to be good till probably spring, maybe midsummer, pushing it.
And it starts to really, if you're noticing anything, you can dry them, dehydrate them, can them at that point.
Which all those,
Yeah.
dehydrating would extend the life of them for years.
Yes.
Canning will extend the life. My rule of thumb, yours may be different, but my rule of thumb is 3 to 5 years on a jar, which none of
Right.
mine usually make it past 3 years.
Ours about 4, what
Yeah.
we've noticed.
Yeah.
And the food is just as good as the day I canned it.
Yeah, exactly.
But like I said, that's the rule of thumb, soups and
Yeah,
stuff.
right now I'm working on my home canned green beans from 2016. From
Yeah.
August
Oh, yeah.
to 16, and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
I just did a video yesterday of garlicky, buttery green beans on the grill.
Oh,
Oh, was that ever good?
I didn't
and
see
it's
that
so
one yet.
easy. I haven't put it up yet. It's so easy and it tastes so good, even canned.
yeah.
It don't have to be fresh.
One
or
of the
frozen,
right.
whatever.
Yeah, I know. I see some of the people on their Homestead blogs. They had one lady was doing fish from her freezer, and then salmon and some walleye, I think.
Yeah.
And she was showing how she canned it and stuff. Now, I canned fish for years because out of Lake Michigan, when they put the big salmon up there, my father-in-law would catch these gigantic
Huge.
22, 25-pound fish. He skinned them all, boned them all, and then he chunked them up for me. He froze them, and when I was ready to can, I would unthaw them. Of course, you do it in the refrigerator, unless you're right there and can quickly do it in water within, which you
You're right.
can in an hour or so with cold water. Canned enough for 2 years usually. I always can enough to go 2 years. Fish, whatever I'm doing. And I tell you, that salmon, my children, salmon loaf, salmon patties. The one question I have, Renee, and maybe a lot of people would too, now I see them canning chicken breasts, and they pull it out to use for chicken sandwiches, which when you're buying a can from the store, you don't really worry about it, but now we're talking about home canned chicken. With that, they just fork it up and then make a salad like you would with salmon. I was kind of questioning that because I haven't canned chicken very much, and I think I bake whatever in a casserole. So you feel safe just opening up a jar of your white chicken and shredding it for sandwich meat
I've done it many times.
like you would with salmon? Because I never boiled the salmon. I'd make salmon salad, you know, like you do tuna.
Right. No, I feel very safe about it and very confident because the way the recipes are modern, if you follow that recipe
Yeah.
to the T and
Yes.
you have your proper, proper processing range, you don't have to pre-cook that and boil it for
Yeah.
10 minutes.
I was wondering, and I kind of thought that was the case
But
because
if you want to, you can take and put it in the oven, cover it up, leave the juice in it, put it in the oven, heat it for however long you want
Yeah.
to heat it for,
Yeah.
and then let it cool off and then use it.
yeah,
But
that's what
I have just taken it right out of the jar, made
Yeah.
salad.
Yeah, I did with the salmon. Now, up here anymore, you know, salmon is getting scarce. They still fish for it in Lake Michigan. But when you buy a can of salmon, say from Alaska,
A spider got me with a web.
anyway, you're only able to kind of buy the pink salmon
Right.
Now-
or the mackerel.
or mackerel. Now, it's not bad, but I find the pink salmon slightly fishy. And because it's an oily fish. And I was thinking, I love canned sockeye salmon.
Uh-huh.
So it's on my list when Sam's Club or the market, Lucky's Market, has that big sockeye salmon on sale. I'm going to buy a couple slabs of the sockeye salmon, and I'll, of course, skin it. And I don't like, I mean, the skin's fine. You can pull it off when you take it out of the jars, and the bones will melt. If you add a little vinegar into your fish, if you want to keep the bones in.
Yeah, the vinegar dissolves the bones.
The bones, yeah. And because it's
not
such
big bones.
no,
just
small,
a little,
like some of the Y bones, you know. And then when you buy salmon in the can, it still has the backbone, but those are, you can mash them right up. They're so
they're dissolved,
Yeah.
and even at that, you won't taste the vinegar either. If you can.
No.
Some people are always afraid. Oh, you don't want to taste that vinegar.
No.
I can't.
No, you don't taste the vinegar. But I thought, you know, that sockeye salmon, I don't care for it baked or broiled, fresh, but I'm going to can it the next time. And that way, that pink salmon, basically, is what the Alaskans, when they fish for the chum salmon, the pink salmon, that's dog meat in Alaska. Yeah. And every time I open a can of pink salmon, it's like, I'm eating the dog meat they feed their dogs in Alaska.
They get the happiest dogs around.
They're sure looking healthy.
Oh,
but
gosh.
I thought, well, this is exciting. I'm going to do chicken breast when I get it on sale, and the salmon, which I haven't canned meat for quite a few years. But
Well, I'll tell you what. When I got my chicken breast, I got it on sale, on the one-day sale at Dublin. People don't believe me, but it was a one-day sale, a Green Friday sale at Dublin for 99 cents a pound. Boneless, skinless.
Yeah.
So I think I got 40 or 50 pounds of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I come home and I spent the whole rest of the day canning it and putting it up. But if you, especially up here, if you go buy a can of chicken about the size of your salmon,
Yeah.
you're going to pay about $10.
Yeah, salmon is very expensive anymore. It used to be fairly cheap. Mackerel's not bad to eat for salmon loaf and stuff. I like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I only paid, I think when I calculated, of course I never calculate my time because
No,
that's
I
just,
never do.
No. I calculated all that up, and I think it cost me about $1.47 a quart jar for my chicken.
I used to figure it out years ago, the cost of labor, the cost of electric to do things, but because you're doing all of this for your family or yourself, whatever you constitute as your family, you know, it could be 2 people, it could be 9 people or 5. You're doing this because you're helping feed them. I mean, this is how there's, you know, some people don't find pleasure in life sometimes, a lot of times.
Canning is not a hobby.
No,
Canning it's not a career. Canning is a way of life.
It is, and it brings so much pleasure to you once you get started. I just lose myself in that process, like when I go to my
therapy.
garden. I mean, it's just, it's therapy. Yeah, some people, like I said, they don't find a lot of pleasure in life, so sometimes, you know, stuff like this is just what a person needs to help them.
It's one of the most secure feelings when you sit in your pantry and looking at all those beautiful jars. And everyone's sealed too. You know, they all sealed.
Oh no, 3 didn't seal. We got to eat that stuff tonight.
Oh yeah, and when you start canning, friends, when you need to check your jar. I check mine and I wipe my jars down every month, once a month, and I check because every now and then a seal with these new seals, these new lids,
they just
will pop.
I know.
And you'll be sitting, and I was sitting at my dining room table one day, and I heard this bleep, you know, and it kind of echoed, and I thought, oh, I know what that was. Well, go run through 500 jars and try to find which one it is, but yet I found it, and it happened to have been a can of potatoes, which would have been rancid smelling if I wouldn't have found it, you know.
Nothing worse than rotten potato.
But botulism.
Yeah.
Botulism. You guys have to do your homework on it. I'll give them a link. I'll give you a link to study botulism. It's very important. It is odorless, tasteless, and you can't see it.
Colorless.
Colorless. You can't see it. You can't see it, smell it, or taste it. You will have no idea it has infected your jar until
No.
it makes you sick.
That's why it's important to follow the guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're on
we're
to
on
pressure
to, yeah, and that's where,
pressure cooking.
let's see. Pressure canning. Used for low acid foods. Meats, fish, and poultry. And most veggies. Except tomatoes. But it can be tomatoes too.
Yeah.
Depends on how you're gonna make your recipe. But pressure canning low acid foods does require special care.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It heats food to an internal temperature, not just the jar, the food inside that jar, because low acid food is very dense. The meat is very dense. So that meat has to be heated to 240 to 250 degrees on the inside of the jar, inside the meat. That's why you never pack it too tightly, because the tighter you pack that jar,
the harder it is for the heat to get through.
To get to that,
the food.
Yep. And it destroys the spores. That heat, that 240 degrees, will destroy the spores that cause botulism. So, of course, again, which is the most deadly form of food poison known, it's a neurotoxin. So anyway, let's see here. What else do I got down here? It uses less water because you don't have to cover your jars up. You do have to put, I don't know about you, they say 2 to 3 inches of water in the bottom of your canner, but I always wind up putting at least 2 quarts. And that's where I leave it.
My canner calls for 3 quarts, I believe.
3 quarts?
And that's a new one, year before last. I put 3 quarts in.
See, mine's old. Mine's from 1972.
2 quarts are fine. I've used 2 quarts for years, and this one says 3 quarts. But then this one recommended, it's a new one, pretty much, 11 pounds of pressure for our area instead of 10.
Mine's still 10.
Yeah.
See, it all depends on the canner you get, but you have to go by what the manufacturer recommends on that canner, because if your full canner runs dry during processing, it risks breakage of your jars, and with the newer canners, as thin as they are, it will definitely warp them.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of safety gauges and stuff on them where they would release without exploding like they used to.
Oh, yeah.
I heard the stories, that's why I was pretty afraid, but then I'm thinking, well, you're going to conquer this. It's not going to conquer you, Maureen.
Well, you know what, friends? The older ones, like the one I have, could explode. But not like Hollywood blowing in chunks all over the house.
Not like Lucy.
The most it
Ethel
would do is probably the lid to the canner would be on its way to the moon. You know?
Or through the attic.
That's it. But the ones nowadays, the newer ones, I haven't heard of any new ones ever exploding. Because they have so many safety mechanisms on them, and I just don't think people really have to worry about that. But that doesn't mean you can walk over to that canner after you shut it off the stove, rip the jiggler off in it and open it up. Well, you wouldn't be able to now. I think even the jiggler has a safety feature.
Yeah, you don't take that off till when that little knob on mine, when the pressure's out, I believe it goes down flat. When it's building, it'll raise up about that far. But you can't touch that till that pressure's out. And what Renee might probably do is do a demonstration to show you exactly how the pressure build. Can you?
I can, but I can't really, because I have my canner's from 1972.
Well,
you could literally take my jiggler off and open that sucker up.
Oh, see.
And away everything would go to the moon.
Well, when I get the fish, then maybe you could come to the house and I will
do a demonstration.
Could demonstrate how to do the pressure cooker, you know, to pack the fish, you know, and I knew a lady, I was helping clean salmon over here at Tippy Dam, which is off the Manistee River here where we live, and she had worked in Alaska in a cannery for years, And she always canned the smoked salmon up there. They did smoked salmon and they canned it. Oh,
Yeah.
I did it. It's incredible.
Oh.
It's just incredible. So what they did when they wanted smoked salmon, they opened a jar, just ate it out of the jar. So, but they pressure cooked it. So
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, I could clean one of those big 25-pounders, fillet it, and bone it out pretty good.
Yep.
So,
Well, pressure canning is the same concept as water bath canning, only under pressure. And that is why you don't need much water, because that steam is what builds the pressure. And the same thing with the water bath. It keeps the liquid in and the microorganisms out. And oxygen.
I'm planning on doing the salmon within the next month or so.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think.
We should do a video on it.
And you should, because that way we can show folks, you know, because there's some pretty good videos on how they do that to release the steam out of the vent. And
Yeah, we need to do a video on taking care of your pressure canner.
Yes.
And, I mean, we can give them the little odds and ends, like letting it vent. You have to let it.
10
I'll
minutes.
get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get them confused.
And
Let's see.
cleaning through the little hole where the steam comes out with the
Right.
pipe cleaner. There's a few maintenance tips on them.
Yeah, we need to do a video on that. Let's see. I think I hit it. Okay, all we got to do is talk about the low acid foods. I already told them that.
Yeah, fish,
So let me see.
vegetables.
We'll set that down there. Now canning, pressure canning. We told them you don't need much water. We told them how much water, according to the manufacturer of your pressure canner, and maintenance according to the manufacturer.
Yes.
But when you have your pressure canner ready and you're going to do a round of meat, okay, you're going to put your recommended amount of water in the bottom. Remember in your recipes, if you are cold pack, if you are doing cold meat, cold jars, you need a cold canner. If you're canning hot meat, hot jars, you need a hot canner.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to get what's called a heat shock, thermal shock. That's what I'm thinking.
Break.
Thermal shock. And that jar, if you've ever pulled a jar to your canner and the bottom is perfectly off,
Yep. I've had that
that's
a few
thermal
times.
shock.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. So never mix it. If you're going to can something hot, like hot leftover soup, make sure that jar, that lid, everything is hot and the canner is hot that it goes in, or vice versa. Always, 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 and we can't stress that enough either, always make sure that when you turn that canner on, your food's going to be in there, you are not going to put the jiggler on it. You are just going to let it come up to temperature. You are going to let that spew, your vent, where your jiggler goes, what they call that.
It's a
port.
Yeah, the port where the
port.
steam. Yeah.
Yeah, the steam port, vent, whatever. You're going to want to let that vent a steady stream of steam for 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
That removes all the air out of the canner, any air pockets, because with that, if you don't do that, it tends to reduce the temperature inside your canner, which will alter your processing time, which will not guarantee you safe.
Yeah, correct. And it does take a few minutes, even after the 10 minutes are out from venting, and you put the jiggler on, and it'll take a couple minutes to come up to your 10 or 11 pounds of pressure. But then you start.
It'll jiggle.
Yeah.
It'll jiggle, and when you hear that jiggle, that's when you time it.
Yeah. Well, mine is up, because I have a pressure gauge.
Yeah.
When it goes up to the 11 pounds, because I have to play with the temperature of the stove, and sometimes if you're not watching close, it can go like to 15 pounds, just like that. And if you're not careful and you turn it too far down, it can go down below the 11 pounds. And then they recommend you start all over again. So
because
it's a little bit of a fine process till you find the sweet spot.
Can you tell yours by listening to it? I'm sure.
I used to have one like that, and then I
That's
had
what
my,
mine is.
yeah, it's 1 to 3 jiggles a minute. My friend put the dial gauge on my old one, which I don't use anymore. I bought the new one. It just wouldn't work.
I go about my business, and
As
And
long as
I
you
listen
could,
to it.
I did for
Yep.
years. You could hear that 1 to 3.
I don't have a gauge on mine that tells me what pressure it's
Yeah.
at. So I have to adjust the heat.
Yes.
If it starts going and jiggling too
You
much,
gotta
then
put
I
it
know I
down
got to
just
turn
a
it
little.
down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Going-
I have that too.
Going up a pound or so doesn't hurt
No.
as much as maybe going below the 10 pounds or 11 pounds, which mine recommends 11 pounds. At our altitude, I watched one from Idaho, which she had to use 15 pounds.
Right.
Because she was high up in the mountainous area, and it's like, wow, that's different.
Yeah, the altitude.
Yeah.
Altitude. They gotta can your recipe because my friends on here are from all over.
Yes,
And I think there's even a few on them a few I have from Europe and Australia, all over. So you have to pressure can according to your altitude.
Yes.
And most generally, I know for sure, the USDA website for home canning and preserving has an altitude chart.
yes,
They
do.
have that.
Mhm.
They have that in there.
Yeah.
So, but then again, let's see, where was that? Where were we at? Letting it vent, and we went through all that. So now you pressure can it for the allotted amount of time the recipe calls for. When it is done, you simply turn your burner off. You don't move that canner. You don't force cool that canner. You don't lift that jiggler up and let that pressure out.
As much as you might want to.
Oh, no, no, no. Anyway, if you do lift that jiggler up, you might as well just
Yeah, don't do it.
Throw it
because
out,
you'll suck
because-
all that.
siphoning. Yep,
It'll siphon all the liquid out.
yep.
I mean, I've had a few surprises,
Oh, yeah.
especially if you're lifting a jar out and all, like I had a mixed vegetable pickle,
Yep.
and I use 1.5 because they're wide mouth. I love them for certain things. Anyway, I lift the jar out, and every bit of it went back into my water. All
Oh,
those
yeah.
vegetables, the whole bottom was gone.
Gone.
And it's like, oh,
Darn it.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes life really.
And sometimes you
fair.
can can according and do everything
Yeah.
really good, and I mean perfect recipe, perfect processing time. You do everything by the book, and you still have siphoning.
Yes, you do.
That just is a matter of the atmospheric pressure,
The pressure.
difference in pressure.
If you've ever been visiting and had potatoes on boiling on the stove, and all of a sudden you smell something, the atmospheric pressure has boiled that pan dry just as slick as a whistle. I mean, you know, I've been through that once or twice
Oh,
visiting
yeah.
with a friend. She goes, "You smell something?" She had her potatoes boiling. That water was gone, like in minutes it seemed like. She must have left it on high.
Yeah.
So yeah, pressure in the atmosphere has a lot to do
Oh,
with
definitely. And don't be alarmed if after your canner is all, depressurized and you open your lid. Of course, you're going to open that lid away from you
Yeah, away
because
from
it
you.
will burn you. And steam burn
That
is not
steam
nice. Yeah.
hurts.
So you've got your little tongs and you're going to take your jars out, and you notice inside there that they're still a little bubbly. Nothing wrong with leaving that lid off and just leaving them sit right there
Correct.
and cool down. But even at that, when you take them out and you put them on the counter, don't be surprised if there's a few little bubbles in them. That won't hurt.
No. And
But vicious or vigorous bubbling, yeah, just leave them sit right in there. You can even turn that canner off and just walk away.
yeah, and let it cool right down.
Yeah.
And always set them on a
I
nice
do
towel.
that a lot of times at night if I'm canning and it's
Just let 'em
the
go.
last one,
Yeah.
you're exhausted
Yeah.
and you just want to go to bed. You don't want to mess with it. When it's done processing, I just turn it off and away I go. In the morning, I take it out. And it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And they're all sealed.
Yes.
And if you have something with pressure canning, even pressure canning and water bathing, if you have an item that does not seal, you can just take it, well, when you wipe your rims off, when you wipe your rims off, put your lids on, that's when you check to make sure you have no nicks. But sometimes it's not the jar, it's the seal. And if it doesn't seal, you can reprocess that within 24 hours. But
Yeah.
do not just leave it out. You got to put it in the fridge.
Refrigerator. And make sure they're set on a nice towel away
Yeah.
from any cold draft,
Yep, yep.
because that might,
And yep.
crack them or break them.
And when you do reprocess them, when you take that lid off, You wipe it with, I always wipe mine with a little vinegar and
I noticed some of the people do. I usually use a really clean little cloth and wipe them off.
Just wipe them off.
Yeah.
Put a new lid on, tighten it down just finger tight, and reprocess it. But you have to reprocess it through the same steps and for the same length of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's a wonderful thing to be able to can, you know.
It is. It is.
But there are precautions.
Oh yes, yes. And it can be intimidating. It can be very scary. When I first learned how to can, Linda brought down her pressure canner, and I'm like, hiding on the other side of the room watching her from a distance because I just knew that thing was going to blow the hell out of the kitchen, you know.
I've always been up for a challenge, and I don't like things to beat me up. It's like, you're not going to beat me up, and so you work at it and practice, you know.
Oh, yeah. Once you feel comfortable, hang it up.
Yeah.
You don't never want to feel comfortable and too confident.
No. I still can't remember recipes. I look at a recipe like for baking because they're exact, and I can't always remember the exact portions. Some stuff are forgiving, things are, but baking's not one of them, and canning is not one of them. So
you never want to be overly confident. You always want to follow that recipe, and one that is tested for safety.
Yeah.
You can a lot longer. She's got many more canning years than I have, but I don't just use any recipe. I think in all this time, in the last 5 years, there was only one recipe that I used that was not in the bulb book or on the USDA website, and that was Homestead Tessie's beans. And let me tell you what, those are fantastic. Yeah. But I did my homework on it, and that girl did it perfect. She did it almost like a textbook.
I would like to try making home canned beans because I did can quite a few garbanzo beans and pinto beans. Renee had given me quite a few bags of pinto beans, and I was having trouble getting them cooked. They were like little rocks. I'm thinking, I'll fix you little buggers. So I canned them, and they're just as tender. I mean, they are so good. I mean, you could just, it's amazing. Even the flavor, it's like, whoa, that's good.
That's one of the few things that are hard to reprocess because they get mushy the second time around. So the best thing for you to do with beans like that, if they don't seal,
just use them.
Freeze them.
Or freeze them in a bag, you know.
Freeze them. Or use them. Yep.
Yeah. I use them in chili, baked beans. You know, the idea of having your own home canned baked beans appeals to me because I'd always once in a while buy Bush's baked beans or the big jars of Randall's mixed beans or Great Northerns, but or I would soak my own beans overnight in water and then cook them the next day for baking. I actually knew a young woman years ago who thought beans only came out of a can. Bless her heart, she never knew that beans could be soaked and cooked. She just opened a can all her life, and maybe that's how she was raised. Because nothing surprises me anymore. And I said to her, oh no, I mean, you can take a package of northern beans and soak them, and if you're lucky, they'll get tender after you cook them. I don't know, maybe my beans were really old, but boy, did they get nice after pressure canning.
Oh yeah, that does wonderful.
And tastes good.
That tenderizes a lot of stuff, even an old rooster.
He might be listening.
Wait, he's young. Shh, don't listen to that, Rocky. But yeah, there's some things like leftovers. You can safely can leftovers. Say you have leftover beef stew.
I'm going to do one of those batches this year too.
Yeah.
I haven't done stew. Oh, I think I did one batch years ago of stew. Awesome. Yeah.
Even if it's cooked.
Yes.
And you're going to can it, you still have to can it as if it was raw.
Yes, you do.
90 minutes. Anything with meat is 90 minutes.
I just did chili, And I had some yellow split pea Indian spiced soup. I didn't want to freeze it. I don't have any room. I've got so much hodgepodge in my little freezer. So I put that in the pressure cooker with the chili, because they have to go 90 minutes for quarts, I believe, for all of that. And there were a couple other quart things. Oh, did they ever turn out nice?
You did yellow split peas?
Yellow split peas, and they had the Indian from, you know, like the Middle East spices. Cumin, and no curry, but oh.
Did you make a soup or just can them with that seasoning?
No, I made the soup.
Oh, I bet those are wonderful.
It was just like velvet. It was not quite, it tastes like the green split peas, but it was velvety. I mean, it was so good. I can't even tell you.
I've never had the yellow split peas, but everybody says they're wonderful.
They are, and a friend of mine, her aunt, she sent down a couple of these big 2-pound bags for me, so I thought, wow,
I got
I'll make
bunch
this.
of them.
Do you yellow split peas?
Mm-hmm.
You should look up, there's so many different.
I wonder if you can just can them without making a soup, just can them.
You probably could, but they'd be pretty like soup when you got done canning them.
Mushy.
Yeah, even a little more than beans. Lentils, because it's basically like a lentil type thing. Little harder.
Canned lentils. I can lentils all the time because I love lentil burgers.
If you made just a regular soup, like you would split pea soup, you could use ham hocks, bacon, onion, and can it that way if your family likes it that way. My other part of my family loved that type of spice.
I'm real lucky because they'll eat, and they've always ate anything I put in front of them. Yeah. I was real lucky. Yeah. I had no picky eaters.
Our little family now, we eat a whole variety of stuff, every kind, and you know, it's amazing.
Yep, John. The only thing with John is because of from his surgery years ago.
Yeah.
I have to be careful with certain things I give him. And the only thing the man will not eat is mushrooms.
I know.
He likes onions, he likes all that other stuff, but they make him really ill. So I have to be very careful. It's not that he don't like them, but mushrooms he won't. I could make a pot of soup this big and put little bitty mushrooms.
He'd find it.
He'd find it.
You know, my grandmother used to come from Indiana every summer, because she was born and raised up about 40 miles north of here. She had lived in Gary, Indiana, and she would come for the summer and put her garden in at this little cabin thing she stayed in with my mother and my mother's sister and little brother. So she would she'd have her husband, my grandfather, send the jars in a barrel on the train from Gary, Indiana, came into the little station in Thompsonville, which is not too far from here.
Yeah.
It came by train, and then one of the men would bring it by wagon and the team of horses to her. Then she canned all that all summer, and then she had it shipped back to Gary for the winter. And she canned everything she could get her hands on. I mean, it was amazing. I've read letters that she wrote. It's just
absolutely.
That's how they did things. I mean, and I'm sure she had the zinc lids and the wire bale jars.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So now you just use them for decoration.
Yeah, you don't want to use them.
But those were all reusable except the rubber.
Yeah, right. The rubber was just like our lids now.
If you had to buy a new rubber for under a zinc jar, I ordered a bunch. And they came from Canada, and they were thin. The older ones were real thick, and the new ones are very thin, about half the size, half the thickness. So yeah, people, that was how they lived. They couldn't go to a store.
No.
I mean, you could in the cities, but...
Yeah. Well, you could go to the store, but you wouldn't have any money for your bills. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have a big, voluptuous garden. You don't have to have a homestead.
No.
You don't have to have a farm. You could live in a little townhouse and can and preserve food. And you can have farmers markets. And 90% of the time, when people say, hey, I started canning, I'm learning how to can, you're going to have people running with jars and lids and rings and, hey, I got an extra canner. Well, I've got 5 water bath canners, you know?
Yeah.
And people are going to come. But if you do have to buy it, say you can't find it used, yes, it can be pretty pricey.
The initial startup
can be pricey, but don't let that stop you, because if you spread that over the years of the life of that canner, you're still going to save yourself money. You're going to give your family quality food that you will never, ever be able to buy in a store.
You control the salts and the sugars,
chemicals,
and chemicals that goes in that food. I am a product. I probably don't look like I am, but I was raised on DDT, one of the worst things that was ever used in the 40s and 50s. It killed bugs. You know, it's what they used in the garden spray. And we ate the food, and I'm sure we washed it, but you know, it killed the bald eagles. It just
killed everything.
It did.
Didn't that get outlawed in the 70s?
Oh yeah, and it was a bad stuff. And then there was paraquat, which is worse, like a nerve toxin. People used on their trees, and I don't use anything because I can't stand the thought of killing a bee. I have thousands of bees in my yard.
Oh my gosh, the bees are what pollinate everything.
Yes, yeah, the bumblebees.
Now the squash bugs are a different story.
Well,
they're not my friend.
No, I found a potato beetle in the ground when we were hoeing up one of the beds from last year, so it must have hatched out.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah.
Did you notice I don't have one potato beetle on those plants?
Well, if you let your chickens in there, they'll eat them.
That's why they're not coming to visit, because they're waiting for them.
Yeah.
Mama said that to me one day. She says, "You don't have any potato bugs on here. These look good." I said, "Well, you know why I don't have potato bugs?" She says, "No, why?" I says, "Right there. The chickens are waiting to eat them."
One time,
I'd let a few of them loose.
Oh yeah. One time we had been growing tomatoes, and all of a sudden, out in the garden, there were tomato worms everywhere. I mean, big tomato worms. So my husband's father said, "Well, snip them with the scissors." So my middle daughter, who was game for anything, she could go to the chicken coop in her high heels and an evening gown and make it look simple. Kelly, she was fabulous. The other two, they didn't want to help with. They did, but I tricked them a lot of times. So after killing a few tomato worms, because they're hard to find, she dreamed all night long that tomato worms took over the world. Giant tomato worms. That poor kid. I never made her or had her do that ever again. It's like, that was scary.
The chickens would eat them, wouldn't they?
I don't know. The chickens don't eat caterpillars.
I don't think nothing eats them.
Guinea hens will.
Oh, guinea hens will eat anything.
Yeah.
You won't have a tick or nothing in the yard with guinea hens.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, I think we hit most everything on our canning. Did I tell me you didn't have to? You don't have to have a garden.
No.
You know, I did say that, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
You can go to the farmers markets. You can get free produce. I've got so much free and stuff like that. People will know you're going to start canning, and they'll be more than happy to help you. So,
I know my neighbor one day, they were canning something, and he came down and said, "Could you spare any jars?" So I said, "Certainly," and I gave him like 3 dozen. And
yeah, I
they
did
canned
that.
Whatever. Yeah.
6 dozen you gave me.
Well, I have over 1,000 now, and I think I'm going to experiment with some dry vacuum packing, dry goods. You know.
Oh yeah, flour and yep.
Yeah, and dry milk. You don't have to.
And we're going to do a video on that too.
Yeah, I've been watching it.
That's oven canning dry goods.
Well, I did some oven canning already, just experimenting, and I didn't have one. I did some spaghetti and cornmeal, and it looks great, but I think I'd rather vacuum pack it because I need a new vacuum packer.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to get the one for the wide mouth and the small mouth.
I have those, yep. I use those for my dehydrated
I'm going to do it
stuff.
for nuts, because you can't oven do nuts, because they're too much oil.
No.
Anyway, that's a whole different subject. Yeah. I don't have room in my freezer.
We'll do a video on that. But I think we hit everything. If any have any questions, just put it in the comments, and we will definitely. I don't know what Miss Mo does. She knows everything.
Not really. You know, you learn and experiment, or not. I mean, you just learn through trial and error a lot of times, but you're following your instructions, and sometimes things still go wrong.
Yep. Sometimes you'll get that that canner full of jars all ready, the
One will
lids
break.
and the rings, and say, well, darn, I forgot to wipe the rims off.
Yeah.
Or I
Yeah.
forgot to debubble it, you know.
Yeah.
Oh well, I just run it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can
with
run it.
fish and stuff, because I like to use the boneless chunks. The one lady was rolling the fillets up and putting them down in the jar with the bone. I'm not sure if she put vinegar in it. I think just the pressure cooker will soften the bones, but the vinegar helps.
Yeah,
really
vinegar.
soften 'em.
Even when you're canning venison,
Yeah.
I put a little bit of vinegar in there, and it gets rid of that what is it?
The
That silvery
silver skin or the
peritoneum or whatever it is.
You try to clean all that up off
Yeah.
of venison, but sometimes you
You
just
can't
get
get
all.
it, and
Yeah.
that vinegar will dissolve it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
this
and
is
also take the wild taste.
yeah. Well,
Some people like that wild taste, but I'm not fond of the wild taste.
I did the fine cleaning on any game after we were married. If my husband hunted, my sister did the same. My dad wasn't great. He would eat saw it, a chop, throw it in a skillet. That's how we ate it. Bones, fish. He never knew how to fillet a fish.
Right.
They picked the bones after they were cooked, but I learned I wanted no bones in the fish. I boned all the venison.
Yeah.
Everything I learned, and I fine cleaned everything. And that's what makes any type of food you're doing, raising chicken, whatever you're doing, the fine cleaning
Yeah.
is the most important. When we made lard from our pigs, our lard was snow white. And I did cook that on the wood cook stove and
I've
canned
rendered
it.
down so many. I've rendered down so much lard, but
I
I've
know.
never canned it.
I put it in the jars, and it was so hot. I mean, it sealed it immediately. And I
Wow.
didn't can it in a water bath. I just put it in the basement
Oh,
with the jars sealed.
Yep,
And
yep.
I don't know if people do water bath that, but I'm thinking if you're canning, you got to have the jars hot and stuff.
I would render it down, let it cool, and I'd freeze mine.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, doing your own, that's just so rewarding. But
Oh boy, is it ever! And don't let anybody tell you any different.
well,
And if you decide that canning is not for you, you've got freezing and you've got dehydrating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of things you can do.
yes, there is.
There's
Well,
a lot of
it's
things.
been
But I
great
think we've covered
visiting.
everything, haven't we?
Yeah, we sure had a good gab session.
And next time we'll do.
Well,
Maybe we'll run through a video on, or I'll run through a video on equipment.
what you need for equipment.
Yeah.
No, I don't have a jar magnet for the lids. I'd like to burn my fingers.
I'll give you one. I got 2 of them.
Oh, you do?
See how canning works?
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
got 2 of them. I'll give you one.
I saw the women
Just remind
using
me.
them, or the girls, women, and it was like, ooh, I must have got rid of mine that I had 40 years ago.
I got 2 jigglers because, of course, I couldn't
Uh,
find a jiggler one day, and I thought, oh my gosh, I got to can all this food. I don't have
Yeah.
a jiggler. I borrowed one from my friend, and then I ordered one. Well, literally, the day it came in the mail, I found the
Oh,
other one.
yeah.
Of course, isn't that how it always works?
Always happens like that.
But okay, well, friends, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. Also, I will put a link to the USDA website for home canning and preserving, and I will also put a link where you can buy the Ball Blue book from my Amazon link. I'll put that in the description box as well.
We'll do Renea will come to my house, and we'll do a session on canning the sockeye salmon.
Oh yeah.
And you can see how beautiful that sockeye salmon is. Just so bright pink compared to just pink salmon.
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, friends. Well, thank you, and thank
Goodbye
you,
now.
Miss Mo.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a lot of fun.
Okay.
I love it. So.
I know.